All right, guys, I've got Greg Souders and DeAndre Corbe here joining me on today's podcast. Greg, DeAndre, thank you for joining.
Happy to be here, sir. You're welcome.
Pleasure's all mine.
You've been looking forward to this. When I was talking with Greg about getting you guys together on the podcast, I think it's a really unique opportunity to talk with coach and athlete and just really dive into that. So, super excited about this conversation. And just to kick it off, I guess for DeAndre, like, how did you guys originally meet? Like, how did you find your way to Greg? How did that interaction occur?
So yeah, I was actually dating who my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. She was actually training at Standard. So when I would go visit her, I would try to train. It was just starting around right before COVID, and COVID hit, and I had a lot of time on my hands. So I decided to hop in and train in one of Greg's sessions, and I noticed it was very different from what I was used to. So that's how I met Greg, and then from there we just kind of built that relationship. I joined the team, and I've been there full time since 2020.
So, prior to that, were you training elsewhere before you walked into Greg's gym?
Yeah, I've been training. I'm originally from Virginia Beach. I was training under my original coaches, Nestor Bayat he runs Coastal Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Virginia Beach. And I was spending most of my time competing and training in the gi. Now 100% of my training is in no gi, so that's without the uniform.
Yeah, but we'll get into that definitely in a little bit. I guess Greg, like when DeAndre walked through the door, like did you have any idea that he would go on to do some of the things that he's done?
Yeah, I'll share a story from a little more of a sentimental perspective than D will, but I've known him since he was a little kid, since he was a young teenager. I was on Team Lloyd Irvin, and he used to compete against the Team Lloyd Irvin kids, so I knew that him and his brother were like these local, like good guys, like they were just crushing it regionally. You know what I mean? So I knew who he was, and actually we trained together one time. He was young. He was probably 20. His brother was 16. He was a little younger. Maybe he was 18. His brother was 14. I showed up to the tournament early, and they were on the mat training. And I was like, hey, can I jump in with you guys? And I was a brown belt at the time. I threw my gi on and I trained with these guys. And they were a lot smaller, but they were awesome. It was super fun. Their attitude was super serious. I was like, oh, these kids are good, you know? Anyway, long story short, Alex was like, hey, Coach Greg, I like this guy, DeAndre. I'm going to go try to talk to him. And I was like, all right, cool. Bring him to see me, man. I want to meet this kid. You know, I want to officially talk to him. And it was funny because she told him, she was like, when you meet him, you better shake his hand and look him in the face. And that was the first thing I noticed about him. He was very serious, very like studious young man. He was very like respectful and just ready to enter whatever environment he got to with like an open mind and like with his whole heart. So my first meeting with him was just great. I was thrilled that he was walking through my doors.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty serendipitous event, right? You guys kind of crossing paths, and DeAndre, going back to last time I talked with Greg, I know Greg's been really pushing the no gi approach for several years now. Like, what was that like when you first went to a more traditional? I'm assuming show you the moves and then repeat, maybe a little bit of resistance to going to Greg's environment, which is totally different. What was that initial transition like?
It was definitely very it was eye opening, I would say. To me, whether it was the traditional approach that I grew up in, or it was the approach that I currently participate in now, my goal was to always find ways to get better. Back then, the only thing I knew was what I was told, right? So I would just, like he was saying, I would just listen to my coaches, train hard, and whatever success I got there, I would try to be as successful as I possibly could. And I definitely was eye opening, but like again, the thing that was driving my choice to train at Standard was just skill development, trying to get better at my craft, and I would definitely say it was very different. And one of the other things I would say about just coming from the traditional approach to what we're doing now, it was a lot more fun, all live, a lot more problem solving. So that's something that caught my attention right away, and I enjoyed right off the bat.
Was there a point like during this process where it just kind of clicked for you, where you like, okay, like I understand? Because I imagine, I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but like a lot of athletes when they are like put in this environment, it's like, oh, this is shit, this is a lot of stuff going on. Was there at any point where you were like, okay, this makes a lot of sense, I see what Greg's driving at here? Like, was there any point like that for you?
So I think, like I remember, so I would at the time when I first started training at Standard, I would take a 3-hour drive from where I'm originally from to train at Standard and go back. So on those 3 hours, I did a lot of reflecting, and at first I was questioning a lot of the things Greg was saying, because I had come to him already as a black belt, and I had thought I had a pretty good understanding of what grappling was. But, like you said, I came in with an open mind, and I wanted to try to understand grappling from this perspective. One of the things is probably one of these car rides back to back home from Standard was I started to realize I was trying to bridge the gap between learning techniques and moves to the problems and the invariances he was showing me. So what I had to kind of do was like, all right, there are X amount of moves. I would name move 1, 2, and 3. I said, I know I've had success with these moves before in a live scenario. Then I asked myself, why were these set of moves working? What were the invariant things amongst that? What were the effects that they were creating? And that's when I started to realize the importance of fulfilling a task as opposed to memorizing a sequence of movement patterns.
Yeah, wow, those 3 hours, or I guess, is it 3 hours one way or 6 hours round
It
trip?
was it's 6 hours round trip, 3 hours one way, 3 hours back. And I would
Man,
at first I would spend Friday evening all the way to Sunday evening just training at in Maryland. And then I officially moved over there like about a year after that.
that's some dedication to be just driving that long, man. That's impressive. I got a lot of respect for you for doing that. So, Greg, so last time we talked, things have changed quite a bit. Obviously, it's changed for DeAndre as well. But how has it been now with this approach? Obviously, you've taken it and like I talked to Sean about this, you were kind of one of the first people that I know in grappling that have fully embraced an ecological approach in no gi. Like, what has changed since then when you started, or sorry, since we had our last conversation to now? Has anything changed significantly for you? Is any differences?
But really, for me, DeAndre was a strong catalyst for my seriousness. So I was always a very serious coach, always trying to make very serious students, but I never had a student that matched my level of intensity and focus. And so having him by my side and having him take the journey with me gave me an opportunity to really see what kind of effect I could have on a very dedicated and very serious athlete. And then in turn, he gave me that same energy back. So I learned so much from watching him compete, from watching him grow, communicating with him, trying to figure out what makes him tick emotionally, technically, mechanically. Like it was just this wonderful relationship that I'd never had before. So I feel like it was my first real transition into coaching. Because I think coaching is really understanding your athletes and their needs, not just the things I know about grappling. So he gave me that opportunity to really, really dig into my coaching ability. And he matched me equally. So for me, that's what changed the most. So from where I was in 2020 to where I am now, 2025, I think my understanding of how to operate within this framework for specific athletes for high level competition has grown exponentially.
Along that same lines, I'm curious too. Like, how do you protect DeAndre from your own biases, if that makes sense, right? Because a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
coaches have a, you know what I mean, he's his own unique athlete, has his own movement signature. How do you protect him from yourself?
We each play our role. So he understands his limits and I understand mine. And I always give him freedom to operate within his own framework. So when we first started, it was just a conversation of, cause the thing is, it kind of started like this. I knew I wanted him as an athlete. Like right away, I was like, yo, I want this kid to move here, but I wanted to be on his own terms. I never wanted to try to sell him on anything. And so one day I just kind of lightly asked him like, hey man, how would you feel if I was your coach? And he just said, yeah, I'd love you to be my coach, man. And let's start. And so anyway, I always kept that mood with him. So, hey, D, here's an idea I have. Hey, here's some things that I think will work well. Here are some of my philosophies about jiu-jitsu. And I would let him take and pick and pull whatever he wanted. I'd never forced him to go in one direction or another. And I always tried to be sensitive to what he was actually doing and what was actually working. Um, so, yeah, I don't believe in controlling my athletes. I believe in supporting them and letting them make their own decisions. I always stay true to that no matter what's happening.
DeAndre, what was your perspective on that? Like, how have you felt that like come through? Where Greg hasn't been, just from an athlete's perspective, a lot of coaches will tell an athlete, this is how I want you to solve a problem, if they even use the word problems, or this is how I want you to move. Like, how has that shown up for you?
So in terms of the original question about like how do I the biases, like we both, like he said, we both play our role. My role as an athlete, his role as a coach. But I think what allows those biases to at least be revealed, and then so we understand if there is any, is that there's a continuous dialogue between athlete and coach. That means, I'm giving him like recovery metrics. I'm telling him how that felt or what's going on. This is the difference, I think, is between a coach and an instructor. The coach is involved with the athletes at every level because skill development is not just on the mat. It's off the mat. It's the recovery, is what's going on in their lives. So an involved coach is gonna, what's going to happen is less likely for those biases to take negative effect. Does that make sense? Because if there's a constant dialogue between athlete and coach, it kind of presents itself if there are any biases, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think what we have, people think coach and athlete, but it should be one thing, a coach athlete dynamic. It's we're all after the same mission. Everybody has their role, but opening that dialogue between coach and athlete is an important part of that, to getting rid of any biases on both sides.
No, I love that. It's like a system, coach athlete system, right? You each have a role, and it can change, I'm sure, during different times, like different times of competition or different times of in your career, in your life. And
Absolutely.
so, competition wise, man, you've had a lot of success lately, right? You were, I think you were just named number one by Flow Grappling,
Yep.
right, which is pretty cool. I saw that graphic. I was like, oh, Standards up there, number one. I'm like, that's badass. That's really cool. Obviously,
Yeah.
you did great in the ADCC trials, right? No, you won the West Coast, right?
Yeah, I won the West Coast Trials last year in 2024.
Okay, that's awesome. So I want to talk about like competition and that relationship. Like, does that change that dynamic, that system that we just mentioned? Why we talk about variability. I know Greg, you're big on variability and exposing your athletes to that. Do you change it as DeAndre is getting ready for competition? Does your periodization of skill and your practices change?
Yeah. So we do it. So generally, we do like high frequency training. So when there's nothing coming up, we still train six. And if the guys can handle the volume 7 days a week, not as a forced idea, but just as a way to always make sure we're doing a little bit each day to really just stay attuned to the information and really keep the coordination pattern strong, just stuff like that. But as we get closer to competition, we start doubling down on the intensity and volume and reducing the frequency slightly. And so we'll switch to maybe a 2 a day pattern with 12-hour breaks in between training sessions. And then right now we're in a current model where we're taking 2 days off completely, Wednesday and Sunday. So anyway, we just keep adapting and changing to DeAndre's needs specifically. And so, yes, also too, as an athlete grows, their ability to tap into certain levels of intensity and certain levels of focus need to be considered. Because where some of my younger athletes might not need the type of breaks that DeAndre needs, he'll need like more breaks within his training cycle so he can recover more because he's able to push more intensely with a more focused intentionality throughout the week. So so I have to consider that, and we try to bake it directly into the training. And last thing I'll say is D's very good at communicating what's happening with him. So our strength conditioning coach Rob Wilson has created a system of metrics that D can communicate to me through a spreadsheet, and so I can watch the trends that are happening, and I can pull and adjust volume and intensity as we go along.
That's awesome. Sounds pretty integrated. DeAndre, like, what is that like for you? What is that mindset going into competition like when as you're getting ready to, do some of the biggest things in your life?
To me, nothing really changes from the perspective of the athlete. I come to practice, because of that open dialogue between coach and athlete. I trust and I have confidence that Greg will adjust practice as needed, which is, I think, is a important part of the coach athlete relationship. But in terms from my perspective, whether we're far away from competition or getting closer to competition, my job is to show up as recovered as possible, as focused as possible, and be ready to put as much effort as needed into that each individual practice. And I like I said, I am confident that Greg is adjusting practice as needed in relation to where we are in the competition schedule. So for me, I'm coming in recovered, coming in focused, and ready to put effort. And then when the final bell rings, relax, get ready for the next training session.
And then, so talking about in competition, one of the things that's very fascinating to me just is this language and communication, especially like in competition. Just having not been in that scenario, I just trying to imagine what that looks like. Like as an athlete, when like how much do you value communication between fights? How much in fight communication or in bout communication? Like what is that like to you? Sometimes, more from a casual fan side, when you see like whether it be boxing, obviously you have a minute, and MMA you have a minute, and it seems like a lot of talking sometimes. I'm like, well, how much is an athlete actually absorbing? What are they actually picking up on? Like, what are your thoughts on communication from a coach? What do you value when it comes to your in-fight communication or between matches?
So I would say whatever language Greg is yelling to me mid-fight, it's something that we know. Like it was already said in the room. It's a language we both understand. It's a language that's understood amongst all our teammates. So anything he's saying is nothing new. But really, all his job is in the corner is to make sure our focus is not straying. Does that make sense? So he'll say very simple instructions or cues in the corner, and that just keeps us focused on what we are already doing. So I think that's the biggest value of having a good coach with a common language in the corner, is that it just keeps me focused during the match, which is you tend to stray at those high level matches, and where it really counts, you want to stay as focused as possible. And as for in between fights, he has to understand each individual athlete. For me, he knows he can say anything to me. It's got to be simple, and I'll implement right away. For some other athletes, maybe they don't like to be talked to. They just want to stay focused. They just want to stay alone. He understands that, and he'll do that. But and then there's some athletes that need a lot of instruction, and he'll do it. It's really, again, always coming back to that dialogue, knowing his athletes. Is he knows how to communicate with each individual athlete at the competition setting, because let's say the competition is probably the most stressful part of the whole process, and he needs to make sure that we're all feeling the best when we're competing or getting ready to compete.
Greg, do you have any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah. So I have a couple rules for it. So the language you use in performance is the same language used in training, which DeAndre already talked about. And I think this is important because it allows us to communicate. We're seeing the same thing. We're seeing the same thing. And again, it is about focus. And some athletes don't want to hear something. Some athletes do. And so I have to adjust accordingly. But we always have something we return to, because language is just an informational constraint. It affects attention and intention. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that our intentions and attentions are in accordance with one another. The language we also use is not only simplistic, it's focused on things we're doing to our partner or our opponent, excuse me, and things that are external to ourselves. So very performance based in general. Clear feet, get to the outside, hip access, things that are going to be trained, that are obvious, that are performance based, that are external to ourselves. And we keep that language true throughout the training process, throughout the performance setting. There's no change. I want it to feel similar. I want my athletes to feel like they're doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last 8, 12, 16 weeks, you know?
No,
Um, yeah.
the good thing about your training is that they have been doing things that are similar. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily new. There's new constraints, obviously, but they've been in that environment before. You know what I mean? You've recreated that in training.
That's something that I'm very prideful about. So if you were to come to our room and watch athletes train, and then you were to watch them perform, there's no difference. I mean, there's difference in performance results, because some guys have a good day, some guys have a bad day, but you would never look at a standard athlete and say that guy's not prepared, that guy doesn't know what he's doing, that guy's lost. You never say that. Even with some of our lower performing students, it's not the case. And so I'm very, very prideful in that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of this approach about utilizing what you're actually doing and seeing in competition within the environment. So that's amazing. DeAndre, so one thing, right? So you've become more skillful. All these things are happening as your skill has deepened, right? You came in as a black belt to Greg, but I'm sure you've become much more skillful since that initial interaction. But how has your perception, or do you notice any perceptual changes for you? Like when you're in competition going against somebody, does what you see and maybe the affordances you're looking for, the openings you look for, has that changed in any way in that past, several years?
I would say, just because the nature of the approach is, I'm looking at simple tasks, simple tasks to accomplish. It's really a big confidence booster, because I don't know, probably if there's any competitors listening to this, there's this uneasiness, almost this anxiousness right before contact when we engage in a match. For me, it's what happens. Any thoughts that go into my head is never a sequence of moves or anything like that. It's about effects, creating effects and accomplishing certain objectives. It's very, like he said, he's cueing us to search externally. We're not getting in our heads. We're trying to complete tasks that we've done in the room, and with the coaching in the corner, he's making sure that we're staying on task the whole time. So that's what I'm really seeing when I'm competing, or even when I'm going live or sparring in the gym. I'm just looking at tasks and if to complete, maintaining certain conditions that are related to certain effects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, could you elaborate on effects? What that means?
For example, I would say so we call in our language we say condition effect. There are certain conditions that produce known effects. For example, raising someone's legs off the ground keeps their hips lower. So those are something that's an example of what I'm kind of, if there is a thought process going on when I'm training, those are the types of things I'm looking at. If I'm trying to stay on his feet and keep his heels off the ground as it relates to keeping his hips down to the ground. That's just one example.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and then know you guys with with uh, with you, Greg, and you are very you're open to the language with your athletes. I know that, which I find which is pretty cool, because I know some people that are in the ecological space, right, or skill acquisition, they feel like their athletes can't handle it. Or they don't talk about that stuff. Like, what is that process like? DeAndre just used a bunch of terms. He knows this stuff well. What is that process like when you're giving your athletes some of this information or this new approach?
Well, it's based on the level of the athlete. So I read something that John Wooden said in one of his books. He said a good coach hides his intentions within the practice. And so what that means to me is that the practice should reflect the theory and philosophy that you're using to design it. So there shouldn't be a separation between the ideas you hold and the practice tasks that are given. So whether my athletes know how it's designed or not, it's already in, and they're going to be doing the things that lead them towards that understanding. Now, there are some athletes who we would call verbal, where I can have conversations with these athletes in a verbal way. I can say, hey, this is why it was designed this way, and this is what this concept signifies, and this is the condition and task that leads to these effects. Now, it just depends on the athlete. So DeAndre is a very verbal athlete. I can talk with him separate outside to help deepen his understanding of why we're doing what we're doing without getting in the way of what's actually happening when he's performing the tasks. But some athletes are not like that. Some athletes don't like that extra information. It makes them feel cloudy. So it's up to me to make sure that I add what's necessary, or and I take it away if it's not.
Right. So you're only providing what he needs to hear at that time.
Correct. Because again, it's about the athlete, not the coach. What
If
makes
I
an
may,
athlete? Oh, good.
if I may add, I'm not thinking about anything when I'm training or competing. He sets out the task, and my job is to fulfill the task, fulfill whatever practice task is in front of me. I'm not thinking about affordances. I'm not thinking about condition or effect. From that, like he said, it's embedded into the practice. All I need to do as an athlete is execute. That is my job as the athlete, is to execute in practice and execute in competition. I'm not thinking. Now, that being said, when I'm off the mat and I'm reflecting on my practice and or post competition, we're reflecting, we could talk like this. One, I have, as an athlete, and eventually as I transition to over to coaching, I would want to know about this stuff. But from a purely athlete perspective, I don't need to know any of this stuff to be a good performer. Does that make sense? It's embedded in the practice.
Yeah, I think what it sounds like too is at least some understanding of it for you makes you a better problem solver, because you look at movement more deeply than just like you said earlier. You're not rehearsing. You're not thinking about what move I'm
Right.
going to do. Right.
Yeah. So I would say the reason why I like to learn about it, especially when I first got to Standard, was buy-in. It was like, I like to know how things work and why things work. There's a logical sequence of events that there's a reasoning why this method is being used, and that's why I started reading the books, because I wanted to know that what I was doing made logical sense. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
now once I'm fully bought in, right? I don't know if that's the right term to use, or I have confidence in the approach. I don't really need to think about that anymore. I know and I'm confident that the practice that is structured for me today, tomorrow, next week, and then as it relates to competition, that it is within this approach that I've read about and I fully have trust in.
No, that makes sense. No, that totally makes sense. So one of the things that I want to talk about is this idea, and we've used it before on the podcast, this idea of like ownership speed of an athlete operating at what the appropriate level of speed is for them. So how do you look? I guess start with Greg. How do you look at ownership speed when it comes to maybe task design or just with jujitsu in general?
So I don't know whether this is right or wrong, but this is what I do. I create my practices generally with a certain athlete in mind. So I know that there are a few things that are absolutely necessary in order to acquire skill that are emotional components or maybe procedural components of the human condition that have nothing to do with what we're learning. It just has to do with how you approach the learning. So the first thing I look for is accountability for your practice, right? So like there's athletes coming in, they're ready to go, they're prepared to do the thing, and I don't have to like pump them up to do it. You know what I mean? So for me, that's very critical. And so that's assumed in the practice design. So I'm assuming somebody's coming in ready to listen, ready to go. Whether they are or not, I can't control that, of course, but again, that's the assumption. The second assumption I'm making is that they will be there frequently. Because we're operating amongst a general population, it's very difficult to structure practice without some standard in mind. And for me, that standard is like it's a 4-hour work week. So if you're there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's how the program is designed. So I'm assuming that level of frequency. So coming with accountability, approaching frequency. And the last one is just understanding that your task focus is what we're using to help acquire the skill, so that a student is absolutely focused on and performing the task given to them. And so, again, I take those three things in mind when designing any class, whether it be a day, week, or month. I'm just assuming that's the athlete that's coming to me, and then I adjust within the parameters. So if I have an athlete who's not, I might have to go talk to him a little bit more. I might have to pump him up a little bit more. I might say, hey, man, you're only here twice this week. I'd like to see you here at least one more day. So again, that standard is set, but we can sort of use the individual's approach as a way to help guide them towards what I would consider to be more effective.
Yeah, and you brought up the point of do have just general pop as well. It's got to be a little bit of a challenge to find high. I know you have special. I'm sure you have special time for people like DeAndre that are your competition team, but to have people that are like I used to go when I would go to jiu-jitsu a couple days a week. It's funny. A side note: when I was you're one of the reasons, Greg, that I wanted to start getting into it because I'm like, oh, okay, this no gi sounds more interesting to me, but the place that I was going to, it was basically very prescriptive, do the move. And so I would try to think about, okay, what is a lens that I would think about it? Or maybe what Greg would reframe this problem as. So just as an aside note, that was something that, I got to give you credit on that because it
very cool.
Yeah, shaped the way I thought. But anyway, so it's got to be challenging when you have Gen Pop and people like DeAndre, and then you have to try to bridge the gap and create, an effective movement problem for those wide populations.
Well, because you don't realize, I mean, unless you met DeAndre and actually learn who he was as a person. I mean, I've been looking at this guy, watching his habits for 5 years, and I also have a closer personal relationship with him because his wife is my adopted daughter. So like, we're a little more closely linked. So I get to watch this man operate in his life and see how seriously he takes everything. The distance between him and a regular athlete, insane. It's so crazy. Sometimes I don't even know what to do with it. Because and again, I'm not sitting here glazing because he's sitting in front of me. I'm trying to be honest about my experience with him. I'm serious. I'm trying to be honest. Like, and it's really, and again, I say this all the time. I should say it. It's been such a joy for me as a coach to have an athlete like him because I don't have to be his accountability buddy. I know that he's striving just as hard as I am. And I know that whatever I ask, he's going to do. And if he needs me to do something, he knows I'm going to do it. And so it's hard to take that same mode and then switch off to like a general person who's like, well, I'm kind of tired today. And I'm not trying to insult the dude. I'm just like, man, the difference is it makes it difficult sometimes. It really does.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. It's something I don't envy. How to bridge that gap, and So DeAndre, when I had asked Greg about ownership speed, like, how do you view ownership speed? If that terminology makes it resonates with you, like, how do you view it in jiu-jitsu?
I would speak from my own perspective. I'm very dedicated. I fell in love with this sport from the very beginning. I wanted to get as good as possible and continue to improve for as long as possible. My life is really organized around training. I love training. Even when I step away from competition, I'll still love training. And when I say organized, my life is organized around training. It's I know when a training session is going to happen. I eat a certain way. I sleep a certain way. I hang around the right people to fulfill that priority, which is training. I've been doing it for 15 years. I loved it. As I've gone through training and competing, I found ways to be a little more professional about it. But back to that ownership thing is like, the saying, what people usually hear from athlete and coach is like, you got to meet athletes got to meet the coach halfway and the coach will meet another athlete the other half, right? I don't really abide by that because, you know, if you read the second principle of jiu-jitsu, mutual benefit, is exactly that, mutual benefit. I'm going to give 100% of my effort because it's something I love to do, and if it's honest and if I do it in an honest way, it will be reciprocated from the coaching perspective, and that's how I view it. I've I've never had trouble getting into practice, and if I have to skip a practice, I let whoever needs to know and the reasoning why, whether that's a recovery issue, whether that's an injury issue, whether that's a life issue. But I prioritize a lot of my life and I organize a lot of my life around practicing. This is something I've done for the last 15 years, something I wish to continue to do for as long as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's part of your life, part of who you are. I've heard you guys mention this recovery aspect. Is that something you've started to put more of a spotlight on, just integrating that recovery S&C part of training a little bit more?
Absolutely. So when I first got to Standard, we were kind of getting super excited. Like we have this new method that hasn't been really been used in the grappling world. We have some good athletes, a serious coach, and we really wanted to show our performances. So in the first couple of years at Standard, I was competing maybe once or twice every month, and that, at first, it feels exciting, and then you start to realize performance starts to degrade, and this is everybody's a little different. Everybody has their own individual features about it, but like what I would notice, like our performance started to degrade because maybe we were competing too much and we weren't recovering, and when it was time to go onto those big stages, we would probably fall short because maybe we weren't fully ready. Does that make sense? There's one thing about being prepared, and there's another thing about being ready for that day. That's when we really started to kind of pull the curtain back on what's going on under the hood and see what's going on recovery wise. And like Greg mentioned earlier, our shared friend SNC coach Rob Wilson kind of helps us with that. Now, you know, just enhancing that dialogue between coach and athlete is that it's not so much, hey, I'm not feeling too well, coach. It's more objective. We have
Right.
that conversation, and then we have, I'm sending him my HRV measures, whatever health metric that we deem is valuable, that is shared amongst my skill coach, Greg, and then my strength and conditioning coach, Rob Wilson. And we we find we are adjusting practice based on that constraint as well, and the constraint of how close we are to competition. But we found in the last couple of years, and like I would say, we started looking at this in 2024 and 2025, is I've been feel well, from my perspective, I've been feeling ready. Every time I step on the mat, I feel ready. That's mental, physical, uh, emotionally, I'm ready to go. And I think peeking into that recovery played a big part of that.
What have you noticed, Greg, as a coach, just from the last couple years you
Exact
guys have
same
been
thing.
doing
I
that?
mean,
Yeah.
like I said, our excitement, we went out there, we were trying to like make a splash, we're trying to make a bunch of noise. And so me as a coach, I was experimenting with frequency and volume and intensity. I just like, first of all, we dialed it up to the max. We were like, we're just going to go hard, and we're going to make ourselves different. We're going to be immune to anything, fatigue, whatever. At first, it was like that was the thing. Like everyone was peaking off it. You
Tell
know what
them
I
the
mean?
numbers, Greg.
What's that?
100 minutes a day, for 7 days.
Yeah.
That was the training schedule when we first got to Standard. So that would be five tens, or it'll be like, yeah, 10 rounds of 10 minutes every day. We were doing that and that was top end. That's like, we know our cap now. But is that necessary? That was what we were kind of doing.
Yeah, it was sort of crazy. Like we just all agreed to it. Like let's just see how far we can take this shit, and like let's see when people start to break. So it was actually a joke. We talked about the emotional component, the sad boy, rage boy. So rage boy was like if the intensity was too high, you're just wanting to punch things and you can't control your emotions. Sad boy is like when you're done with training, you're home crying in the shower, and you don't know why. That's when the volume. That's when the volume is too high. So we realized that there's an emotional component to it. So we started to just draw back. 10 tens, 8 tens, 6 tens, twice a day to once a day to days off. And so now we realize that once the athlete has enough exposure to high intensity, top performance, we can really dial a lot of those numbers back. We don't have to be as voluminous and as intense as we were. So it was just experimentation. I did notice like D right now is probably the most emotionally, psychologically, physically healthy he's been since he's been here. I mean, really being able to communicate what he was feeling and really being able to say, hey, look, I need to take the reins here a bit and like, get myself in a space where I'm really feeling like the self that I want to feel. And of course I gave him freedom to do that. I trust everything he thinks and says. So he's proving that, he needed this break. So it was very good for him.
Yeah. So you said 10-minute rounds. You were doing 10-minute rounds, just so you
10
understand.
and 7 days a week. We did that for about 10 months.
That's intense, man. I can't imagine that. I guess
Yeah.
well-conditioned athletes.
Yeah, well, I know they're psychologically tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Greg, going back, so about 2.5, 3 years ago when we first talked, you at the time said that one of the things that you were obsessed with, you said that you were obsessed with the standing game and the concept of a non-based opponent. I
Right.
don't know if you probably don't remember, that was a while
I do.
back, but
I remember everything I say about jiu-jitsu, man.
okay, good. So what have you uncovered since then? Like, how has that evolved?
So it's been central to our grip fight. So the idea is that people can't put their hands on you or they can't put their hands on the ground. That's their feet too. If they can't put their feet on the floor, they can't put their feet on you. They're basically a broken body. And the more continuous you can grip fight towards those ends, the longer strings of control you can have. So all of our hand fighting, all of our situations, all of our task focus center around what we're doing with our partner's base. And it's constant. We're always destabilizing. We're always segmenting. We're always isolating. And it's just a skill that we've really honed in on as a gym. I mean, so much so that people notice it when they come here. They'll say things like, man, my guard doesn't work at Standard. Or they'll be like, man, I can't get off the ground. And it's like, yeah, we're not going to let you touch that floor. You know what I mean? We're not going to let you touch us either. And so anyway, it's just, I took that obsession and I baked it into our culture here and our training philosophy. And we really built a lot of mechanical and tactical skills around that.
Could you walk me through, maybe getting into the weeds a bit, how might you set up a situation or a problem or a game with that focus?
So we play a lot of continuous conditional games. So one would be, just as everyone knows, keeping the feet off you. So if I'm guard passing, I would just be continuously keeping my partner's feet off me, and I can go anywhere around the body, but I can't hold you down with my chest. So like you can't go chest to chest, you can't go chest to back, you can't put your knees down. So our guys have to get really good at using their hands to keep those points of contact off while moving anywhere on the body. And we would have the bottom player win if they're able to make the top player hit their butt or wrestle up to a connection or get up and close their hands around us. And so that way we had a lot of time while someone is fully trying to destabilize us, while we're always trying to keep them off of us. We do a lot of that. And we do a lot of from the other way too. So we'll have the bottom player continuously use their connections, their hands and feet, to constantly make the top player fall to their hands or hips and try to hold them there just with their feet and hands. And we do a lot of that. We do the same thing from base breaking. So we'll start in a position where we're behind somebody and we're constantly pulling their hands, pulling their elbows off the mat, breaking the knee down to a hip. And it's continuous. So you basically have to fulfill the condition for extended periods of time against an opponent that has a terminal outcome that would stop you from performing if you failed. Again, it's just that would be an example.
Well, what's nice about that is, you hear this sometimes, this term time on task. They use like a really big
Yeah,
term
we
in
use
the
that.
NBA. Yeah, yeah. So it's like you getting more time on task by designing a game that way, as opposed to just having DeAndre just what I mean, just have it be passive or have not any constraints in play there.
Well, for sure, especially for DeAndre. So, like, one of the problems of being a high level like he is he doesn't have a lot of high level guys his level and is in the room. So we have to find ways to really let him spend more time in these exchanges, because if I made things terminal for him and he didn't know how to explore the space, he wouldn't get much out of the engagement unless I put him with like his brother or something. You know what I mean? So he could grab a blue belt or a purple belt who's maybe on the comp team but not competing, and he can use these conditioned games to really like highlight some of those things and really get better at just creating those conditions for extended periods of time.
Do you have to almost stack the odds against him in some ways to create a level of, what I mean, competition, or
Yeah,
else he
but
just smokes?
honestly, he's really used to this whole thing now, and he knows how to take the reins for himself when he needs to. And so, like, I notice him doing it. Like, I'll give a task, and I'll notice he'll like make the guy fall down a few times before he goes and gets what he wants, or he'll like play within a certain space. And I can see him doing it because right now, at the point, even though I'm his coach and I'm still helping him grow, he's at the point now where he understands what's expected of him and how to use the stuff. And so, even when I don't set it, he sets it for himself.
Okay, yeah, so there's some intentionality there with what he's doing. He knows.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Uh, DeAndre, I thought you might want to jump in there for a second. I want to give you space if you did. If
Oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
for sure. I would say about like, what Greg is talking about. I kind of take the reins a little bit. Is like, as an athlete, and over the last my whole career competing, is what I have found is there's a there's a just the right amount of stimulus in a practice to where it's a good practice. It's like, people talk about I've seen it in other sports. They call about the 70-30 ratio of the exchanges you win and the exchanges you lose. Like he's saying, if I'm going against someone that's there, if I have a larger skill gap or I'm ahead of them in skill, how can I, manipulate tasks where I can maintain that right amount of stimulus? If I'm going with my brother all the time, which is my hardest round, I may not get all the wins, and that may be too low on that in that ratio. But if I'm going with someone or with a big, I have more skill than them, and I'm just doing whatever it takes to win. I'm not really exploring anything, and I'm not, I'm too far in the winning side of things. So, Greg does a good job of adjusting the task to making sure that whatever the practice, if the practice is designed for me, that I have the right amount of stimulus where I'm still getting those adaptations and those progressions. But yeah, that's what I would want to add to that is like, there's a right amount of stimulus where a practice is productive, and it changes depending on the time of the year, depending on the individual. For me, I know what I like. I like when I have to continuously problem solve, and we don't want it too easy, and we don't want it extremely difficult when you're not even getting a chance to explore the space.
Yeah, I mean, finding your challenge point, right? It's not a static thing. I'm sure it's different, you know, now than it was back then, and it probably changes
Absolutely.
all the time. So, do you guys feel any pressure just being kind of the flag bearers of this approach at all? Do you guys feel that at all?
No, I mean, well, not for. I mean, like I'm kind of. So I think what gives me a little bit of armor is I'm a naturally aggressive and confrontational guy, and I was from my childhood too. So like, you can throw shit at me, you can say things to me, you can beat me down, you can take things from me, but I'm not gonna stop. So I don't really feel pressure. I feel confident in the effort that I'm going to put into my program and put into my athletes, and I feel confident that the athletes that I work with are going to have that same energy. And I typically choose athletes that do. Like, dude, I mean, D's Armor's the same. Like, he's not going to prep. We all feel it, but what else are we going to do, right? We're going to get up and do the thing. Failure is an option. And the only thing we can do in the face of it is to give it all our effort, to give it all our heart, and keep moving forward. There's nothing else we can do. So for me, pressure is what it is.
How do you feel about that, DeAndre?
No pressure, man. There's definitely intensity, but I wouldn't say there's any external pressure or friction, man. I've been doing this since I was 13 years old. This sport is a luxury to me. It's now that I'm starting to see that I can make a living through competing and through the art is just I'm just so grateful for what's going on. That's why I feel no pressure, man. This is no obligation. This is not something I have to do. It's something I love. It's difficult at times for sure. It gets hard, but it's something I love, and I always remind myself that. And it's a system I kind of grew up in. It's just this is fun, man. Don't forget that this is a game. It's a game that we like to play seriously, but and sometimes we forget it's a game, but that's part of the game too. It's a fun ride, and I'm enjoying it every step of the way. No pressure.
So you guys are aligned on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, honestly though, to just go to a little bit on the pressure side is the one thing that's sort of stressful about being a coach, where the pressure would exist if it does exist for me, would be my athletes. So when I watch how much effort they put in, and I watch how much heart they give, and I watch how much of their lives they get in this, like I feel a little bit like I've got to be there for them. I've got to make sure that they get these results. Like, I get the pressure I feel. I get that it is like do everything in your power. Do everything in your power. You know what I mean? And that's really it. But it doesn't feel bad. It feels like DeAndre said, like I'm grateful that they trust me, and that really helps. So, man, it's like fuck. If they trust me, then I must trust me. Let's just go together. It feels good when all that's lined up.
It's a little bit of
No
positive pressure.
Yeah, no complaints, man. We're like living an anime. We're like living our own anime, man. It's sick. Like, where do you get to just, get a group of friends that align with the same mission, go out and compete and leave it all out there, and then continue to continuously do that over the years? It's pretty sick.
You guys seem really connected, just your whole team on some of the vlogs, when you guys would post those. Seems like you guys are well connected. So it seems like you guys wouldn't want to do anything else.
Yeah, man. No, I love my job. I love my athletes. They're the most important thing in my life. So, like, it's good. And it's funny because we all have different personalities too. So we're all similar in one sense. We all kind of approach jiu-jitsu with the same love and passion, but we're all completely different. But what's interesting, we all exist there's no friction really. Like we all know how to separate from each other when we need to, and we all know how to come together when we need to. And I think that's unique about our environment. Like we could all come in one day and not say anything to each other and just be chilling and still have a great practice. The next day we can come in every joking and teasing before practice, then it gets silent during practice. We work hard, then we do the same thing later. I mean, it's just really nice. Again, I couldn't ask for a better culture here with the guys and with how they interact with one another.
So DeAndre, you mentioned it. You're transitioning to making a living, right? Doing the sport that you love, which is really cool. Obviously, there's so many more opportunities now. It seems like with jiu-jitsu to make money as it's becoming more popular. It's televised more. It's on YouTube and all these things. What does the future hold for you, or do you even think like that?
I definitely think about that. I was talking to my brother recently, and we were talking about that. If there was a time to be an elite grappler, now is the time. When I first started, making money just through competing was unheard of in grappling. Now with the advent, ADCC, CJI, Zapatero, they're putting out really big numbers and payouts for grapplers as purely athletes. I'm not talking about being a coach or owning a gym. This is purely athletes, and we're just at the start of that. I think about, it was funny. It was one of those times where I was telling my brother, it's like, hope I might be able to get my bag before I leave the sport, but I'm not too worried about it because I know where the direction the sport is going, and I know what I plan to do when I stop. I know I can't compete forever, and I'll make that transition over to coaching, and it's something I'm excited about. I'm not trying to rush it, but I'm excited about. But the future for grappling is looking pretty bright in terms of what's these last recent years. You got like Nicky Rod getting $1 million. You got the Bertolos getting $1 million just through grappling, and it's exciting times. It's only going to go up from here. Jiu-jitsu and grappling in general is just becoming more popular. Like you said, it's getting more televised. It's getting a lot more exposure. The UFC has invested into grappling matches. So yeah, man, it's exciting times. And how many more years I have, I don't know. I'm not trying to put a number on it, but I'm gonna try to make as much noise as I can while I still have my youth, while I'm still wanting to compete. And when I do transition to coaching, my goal is to produce guys that could make a living grappling, get them at least to where I got to, and if not farther.
We've got a great role model for that. So I'm sure, hopefully you have many, many more years, but you got Greg to guide you on that. And one of the last questions I have for you, Greg. So, you were on this Instagram live stream, the infamous Instagram live stream, right?
Yeah.
You're getting a lot of attention, right? There seems to be a lot of misunderstanding. I think I texted you. I was like, dude, I think I got an aneurysm like watching that part of that live stream. Like, what is one thing that if you could just, for anybody listening to this, what is one thing that you would like people to understand about your philosophy that maybe is misunderstood, or about ecological dynamics at large? Like, is there one thing that you would recommend for people that are just naysayers to just get before they start naysaying? If that makes sense.
Your emotional opinion about what you think is happening in the world has no effect on what's actually happening in the world. It's better to investigate the things that you're curious about than to turn them down at face value. Investigation is the process that we use to understand and uncover anything to eventually come to an answer. And we do it in all aspects of our lives, whether it be in medicine, whether it be in technology. We can also do it in sport. We have a group of researchers, a group of thinkers who are trying to do that in a serious way to sort of push the idea of pedagogy forward so we can all become better learners and better athletes. So it's best for us to get on board, whether you disagree or agree, and know more about the subject before you open your mouth.
Mic drop. Mic drop.
Oh,
Oh man. Well,
That's Greg.
that's Greg. Yeah,
That's Greg.
I might have to clip that out and write that down. Yeah, man. We've already got it like 55 minutes into this conversation. I think this is a great place to stop. I really appreciate both of you guys. This was super insightful for me. We don't have a lot of opportunities to get inside the mind of an athlete and that coach system. So I appreciate both of you for coming on. It was a great conversation.
agreed, man.
It was my pleasure, man. Awesome. Try try and get better at this.